Hello and welcome to another episode of Analysis on TV 360 Nigeria with me, Oyin Adekunle. Now, Nigeria's northwest region continues to face the ever-increasing threat of banditry on a daily basis. As the military campaign against the armed kidnappers in the region spreads, respective governments of the affected states have also stepped up security measures, most recently with telecommunications blackout. Zamfara, Katsina and other states had earlier announced new restrictions, including a ban on sales of petrol in jerry cans and limits on cattle movement in a bid to cut supplies to bandits. But as the pressure continues, the governors of Zamfara, Kebbi, Katsina and Sokoto states have taken things a step further by shutting telecommunication services in parts of the state. But how effective will these measures be in checking insecurity in the affected states? Joining me now on the program to discuss this is David Okoro, who is a security strategist. Thank you very much, Mr. Okoro, for joining us on Analysis. Now, help us understand, how does or should I say the shutting down now of telecommunication services help improve security?
Well, thank you for having me. I must start by saying that we cannot take the shutting down of telecom services in those areas in isolation. We need to understand the context in which the current military operations is taking place in that part of the country, and the shutdown of telecom services become part of it. We must first understand the nature of the crisis that have bedeviled that part of the country, the personnel that are involved. We should understand also the ecosystem. We need to also understand what is the thinking of the political leadership, what they say in public and what they say in private. And then, of course, you look at what kind of equipment is available to our military. You look at the kind of resources that is at their disposal, the training, and these factors. It is within that context that you cannot begin to say, okay, let's interrogate what is happening in the Northwest, and then what are the steps that need to be taken to address them. I think that the shutting down of telecom services is just one little bit of an entire strategy that is being adopted. And that strategy is to cut off the assets. What will allow the bandit to continue to communicate with each other. And then the vexatious problem of bandit informant, they are everywhere, and they use telephone to inform bandits about the movement of troops. They inform them about the movement of equipment. They inform the bandits about all sorts. So shutting down, a temporary measure of shutting down telecom services is to deny bandits the capability to report on the movement of troops. And then, of course, the other issues of shutting down markets and monetary transportation of fuel and others are all meant to cut off the oxygen that the bandits require. They require food, they require fuel, they require all manner of things, medicine, to be able to continue to carry out their activities. So the first step is a strategic move, is to deny them of access to these vital services. And then, of course, will enable the military to take the next step they wish to take the battle forward.
But without access to internet and telephone communications, fine, you have just explained that it's to cut the communication link between bandits and their informants and all of that. But don't you think that being shut out, so to speak, and heighten confidence, or sort of creates panic? Or
the residents are already in a state of panic and anxiety. So what the military are doing is it's like a man who is sick and needs surgery. So he has to bear the pain of having that surgery done in order for him to be better. So what the military is doing is a short-term measure that is required to bring back normalcy to the people. But by the way, you can see that there are some level of success that have been achieved in the operation so far. Principally, that we are seeing bandits are moving from one location to the other. In fact, what it means is that the bandits will now operate blind. They don't know what is happening. They don't know when the military or the operation is going to get to where they are. They don't know the movement of troops. They don't know the movement of equipment. So it's a strategic move, really, that will definitely help the military to address most of the issues that we are talking about in terms of trying to locate where the bandits are and then engage them possibly.
And then we'll also explain For instance, a state like Kaduna State, where we've seen a lot of these issues, I mean, banditry, kidnapping, and all of that happen, the Kaduna State government has said that they're not looking at employing this measure. So is it something that you think that Kaduna State should also adopt?
Again, this is why I said what you see, the decision of political leadership in an environment will constrain the kind of military strategy that you adopt. What is the politician saying? And if Kaduna State government says they don't want you to adopt this measure, so what is the alternative? Because what this is supposed to do is not a long-term measure. It's a measure that will help everybody to ensure that information is not available to criminal elements. And so if you deny them the source of information, I don't know what is wrong with that. But that brings me to the role of political leadership in the entire conflict. Okay, so you see the military have a strategy to adopt and the state government say no. In this kind of issue, I think it's national security concern, and what the state government is subsumed within the overall safety and security measures that we need to take. Because see, this crisis is not only in Kaduna State. About 5 states are endemic with this crisis. In fact, what I would have expected from the military is that this operation will be carried out simultaneously among all the endemic states, Katsina, Zamfara, Sokoto, Niger, Kaduna, and then maybe Nasarawa to an extent. So this operation is not even supposed to be in Zamfara alone. It's supposed to be something that is carried out simultaneously among all the endemic states. The reason why is because the moment you put pressure on the bandits in Zamfara state, they will just evaporate. They just move to the next available space. And in any case, the states that surround Zamfara have huge, humongous, ungoverned spaces. And criminal elements like the bandits just move into those places. And you hear that already in Kaduna, that Ansaru, an arm of the terrorist groups operating in Nigeria, have already hosted their flags in some communities. So it tells you that nobody knows what is in the mind of the governor of Kaduna State in saying that certain measures should not be taken. But I think that it should be overridden because we are talking of national security. An entity within Nigeria should not detect on national terms, because see, you have many states that are involved. And so we need, in fact, to have had a simultaneous operation in all the states so that you don't have a place to run to. The criminal elements cannot run from Zamfara to Niger, for instance. Because if this process was done simultaneously, then we will have achieved a lot of mileage. But I don't know, whatever.
Sorry to interrupt you, because the Sokoto state governor actually announced this measure much later, and the reason was that some bandits from those states, from Zamfara and Katsina, that had announced the ban on the shutting of telecommunication networks, that some bandits from those states were moving down to Sokoto state.
But it is to be expected. Like I said, it's like a big home issue. When you throw a stone, gather, they will scatter. So when you apply pressure on criminal elements in one jurisdiction, one area, they will naturally look for another area to escape to. And like I said, the ungoverned spaces in Sokoto is huge, in Kaduna is huge, in Niger is huge, in Katsina is huge. So they just move to those spaces. I would have thought that what the military would have done is to simultaneously carry out these operations in all the areas that are endemic with this kind of criminality. That way, you will reduce the opportunity for the criminal to move from one location to the other. But maybe for the reason of lack of funds, equipment, and manpower, they decide to concentrate their effort in Zamfara State. But the downside of that is what we see, that the criminal elements began to move to Nasarawa State, for instance. They moved to Kaduna State. They have moved to Sokoto State. They moved to Niger. This is the kind of thing that would have been thought about before the operation starts, so that they can be carried out simultaneously. But like I said, the military is also constrained with manpower, with equipment, with resources and all that. Maybe that is why they decided to start from Zamfara State. That seemed to be the epicenter of this crisis.
And seeing that the action is not going on simultaneously as you would have wanted now and as other experts would have wanted. Now, what are the alternatives? For Kaduna State now that said, okay, we're not going to shut down telecommunications network, what will be the alternative? I mean, you've talked about ungoverned spaces. These spaces are there, and then bandits continue to exploit these things.
That's the question that Governor Rufai should answer. I mean, the same governor was the fellow who said that he will not pay bandits who kidnap children, and he's not ready to take a firm military action to deal with them. So the question always is, Mr. Governor, you've said that a particular course of action, which seems to be the best in the circumstance, should not be taken. So what's the option? I mean, if you say that criminals in Kaduna State can continue to communicate, share information, and therefore be able to plan their operations and carry it out, and you say, okay, the military comes and says, look, what we want to do is to deny them that particular asset of sharing information for maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then we'll be done. And you say, no, I won't allow it in my state. So the question to ask the governor is, so in the circumstance, what should the military do? But that's why I said that of national security, and we should not allow an individual to frustrate that purpose. So the military should go ahead and do what is needed to save this country. Because see, Kaduna is not alone. Anything happening in Kaduna will affect ultimately other part of the country. So if we allow the governor, because of certain political exigencies, to have his way, then of course you're going to create problems for other part of the country. Because when the crisis escalates in Kaduna, of course it will get to Abuja, it will get to Niger, it will get to all parts of the country as far flung as Lagos, Osun State, Port Harcourt, and all that. They will feel a part of it. So a state governor should not be allowed to dictate at this point what should be done. By the way, that brings me to some of the political decisions that have been taken by some of our political leaders. For instance, I noticed that the Minister for Police Affairs talked about the fact that government was going to dialogue with the bandits and forgive them, so to speak, settle them in their villages and give them starter packs. Now, the implication of these political decisions is that very soon Nigeria constitutes a security risk to other nations of the world. We might not have thought about it or think that these policies will result in that. When you bring, say, okay, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 terrorist elements have, so to speak, surrendered, and you bring them in, and the process through which they are brought back to society, processed and brought back to society, is opaque. It doesn't seem to have met the stringent requirements. And then at the same time, you also say bandits who are killers, who are armed, are now going to be forgiven, settling their community, and giving starter pack. Let me tell you the implication of this. The bandits and the terrorist element can easily move to any country of the world. All they need to do is to change, they get passport. It's easy to get Nigerian passport, change their identity, and they move to countries that...
Sorry to cut you, Mr. Okoro, but we must state clearly here that it's not as if there are no checks, or the Nigerian troops are just receiving anybody that comes without checks. I mean, there's a process of rehabilitation, a lot before they are then returned to society. So let's not create this impression or create fear that anybody just comes and then they are sent back to the society. Please let's not do that.
I'm asking a question. I should know. I mean, this is my area. So the question I should ask you, for instance, we are told that maybe 3,000 terrorists at the end of the day have surrendered. Do you have the facility to process them? Do you have the resources required to process them? Do you have the manpower that is required to process that huge number? Before now, I know that maybe 300, maybe 200 people have been processed through this, have been taken through this process. We are talking of a huge number. And by the way, the military have said that it is not their responsibility, for instance, to take these people through the criminal justice system. It is another aspect, it's another government agency body that should be doing that. I'm not saying this for us to be afraid. I'm just saying reality. See,
please, let's just take a pause here, because if we keep talking about the reintegration and all of that, that would be another topic entirely. So we'll just, and when we return, we'll talk about another angle to this insecurity, which is cyber crime. We'll take a break here and return with more. Please stay with us, don't go away.
In the last 3 years, we have built a multi-purpose center, which is the envy of all in our constituency. And I can tell you that the people who are living there are already enjoying it.
Guy, do you think what this man just said is true? See, I seriously doubt. I'm sure it's one of those their silly lies.
Wait, do you know there's a way to find out if these things he's saying is true or not? This is the Construct app. It gives people like us a sure way to track implementation of constituency projects. It gives valid and verified information on location of projects, amounts allocated, amount funded, the level of job done, and even the profiles of concerned legislators. you and I can post directly on this app.
Are you serious?
This is the go-to app if you want to know how our Commonwealth is being expanded by the government.
Wow. Let's even see if what this man said is true. Show me.
The Construct app is developed by Other Paper Nigeria with support from USAID and is available on both Google Play Store and Apple Store.
And it's true.
Of course, I told you.
Welcome back. If you're just joining us on the program, we've been talking about insecurity in Nigeria and particularly in the country's northwest region. I still have on the program Mr. David Okoro, security strategist. Thank you very much, Mr. Okoro, for staying with us on the program. Now, as we're battling insurgency and banditry and other forms of criminality in the country, there's also been an upsurge in cyber crimes. I mean, we've seen the arrest and conviction of over 1,000 suspects in recent months. So what exactly is driving this trend in Nigeria?
Huge, and the possibilities in that sector is also very massive. So just like we police the physical space, the territorial space, we also need to ensure that we have adequate infrastructure and legal frameworks to be able to protect our cyberspace. So in Nigeria, you have a huge population of young people who are very savvy with the internet and all that. And of course, you will expect that also there will be some people who want to use the opportunities they have in the cyberspace to cause havoc. So it becomes necessary, therefore, that effort must be made to ensure that people who take the cyberspace as opportunity to defraud others, to commit criminalities, that there are regulations to address.
Have a high cyber risk exposure. Would this be that there are some, as you said, we don't necessarily have policies and all of that to check these things, but it does appear that we have a cyber risk exposure, and there must be reasons for that. So if you were to just explain it, why would you say that we have this kind of risk? Hello, Mr. Okoro, can you hear me? Well, I apologize, we lost Mr. Okoro there, but we'll try to reconnect and get him back on the program. While we do that, we'll take a short break and return with more on the program. Please stay with us.
Corruption not in my country.
Hello? Yeah, I found your wallet in front of a supermarket. Meet me at Apple Junction. Yes, I'll be waiting for you.
Now we find out. Two of us.
Thank you very much, officer. You know, it's surprising that men like you still exist in the police force.
Yes, so...
Oh, yes.
This is just a token of my appreciation.
Oh, no, you don't need to do this. We're only doing our job.
Thank you very much. God bless you.
You're welcome.
Now I know police is really my friend.
Yes.
Friend. Hey. Which came up with this one? I don't understand.
You know your problem. You are greedy. I'm a policeman who is doing his job. All forms of corruption in the force. Not in my country.
Corruption not in my country.
Welcome back to the program. Mr. David Okoro is back on the program now. Security strategist, Mr. David Okoro, thank you very much for staying with us on the program. I mean, now before we lost you there, I was asking why it appears Nigeria has high cyber risk exposure.
Like I said, we have one of the largest youth population in the world, and that are very highly active in the cyberspace. And so when you have that kind of size of youths that are ambitious, some that have criminal tendencies, you will expect naturally that you will have this level of cyber criminalities and crime going on. So it's because of our population, we have a huge youth. In fact, around the world, the Nigerian youth seem to be some of the most versatile in the use and deployment of the internet. So you naturally found that in this circumstance that you will have some individuals that tend towards criminal activities. But I would not say that we don't have enough policy and framework, just to say that we need to ramp up this force. We need to increase the capability of our law enforcement. They need to be better trained now. And we need to have we need to upgrade our legal framework. and then expound the infrastructure to detect crimes, cyber crimes, and deal with them. Because the cyberspace is really very huge. And all over the world, law enforcement and the justice system struggle hard to be able to keep pace with the criminals in the cyberspace. So it's not only Nigeria that will have this crisis. It's a problem, it's a global problem.
And recently, the National Security Advisor said the government has begun moves to implement the new National Cybersecurity Policy and Strategy of 2021. Now, how effective do you think that that would be to help the country curtail these crimes?
That would depend on how much information the ordinary citizen have. You know, beyond just enforcement and compliance and all that, education is key. You ask yourself how much information is out there as to issues that have to do with cyber security and all that. Your average Nigerian, how much do they know about this policy? How does it affect them? What role are they expected to play? So it is not enough to announce the availability of a policy. It must also be drilled down to the average man on the street to understand what are cyber issues, what is a crime, what is cyber crime, and how to avoid those cyber crimes. When they see a cyber crime be committed, what role should they play? So good move by government to upgrade the cyber law and frameworks. But most important would be how well government is able to communicate these regulations and law among the citizens so that the citizens can partner with government to address issues of cybersecurity. And then, of course, we also need to strengthen our investigative system, the capacity of our law enforcement agencies because cyber issues are very technical and highly specialized. So we also need to train our law enforcement agents, both in judicial officers and law enforcement justice personnel, train them properly so that they can be up to speed to be able to address these issues as they come up. But we do need a lot of education for the ordinary Nigerians and for those who have responsibility to implement these policies that have been made.
And lastly, before I let you go now, we know that these things are interconnected. I mean, you've talked about population growth, we've talked about unemployment. Already we're fighting insecurity, insurgency in the north and all of that. I mean, how does cyber warfare now complement the military efforts, kinetic efforts, as they put it in military terms now, to fight insurgency? I mean, to bring an end, a conclusive end to the insurgency and other kinds of criminality within Nigeria now?
Well, that's totally another area, and I know that the military have got some units that are involved in training and preparation for cyber war. So as it relates to insurgency, what we should try to do is to ensure that we implement what we call the policy on the protection of critical infrastructure, because it's very easy for bandits, for criminals, particularly terrorists, to using the cyberspace to harm the country. For instance, they can attack your control centers, your oil control centers, and all that. So what we need to do is to ensure that we develop that capacity to be able to protect the critical infrastructure in our country, particularly in the cyberspace. But we have an organization of government, NIDA, whose responsibility really is this, to ensure that the cyberspace, the framework, the policies in the cyberspace are properly carried out. And I know that, like I said, that the military are up to speed. They are trying to do something in that area.
Well, Sir David Okoro, security strategist, we thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Analysis and for sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you very much for your time.
It's been my pleasure to be with you today. Thank you.
Well, that's the much we can take on this episode. But if you want to watch this again, you can watch it on our YouTube channel at TV360 Nigeria. You can also catch other programs on our website, tv360nigeria.com, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter as well at TV360 Nigeria. Well, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again next time. I'm Oyi Adekunle. Bye for now.